indifference curve. An indifference curve is a locus of points, each of which represents a combination of goods and services that will give equal level of satisfaction to a consumer. To illustrate this, we can consider an individual that prefers a combination of two goods. Let's say, for example, food and clothing. Someone wants to eat and wants to get clothes. Then, what combination will give that particular person the maximum satisfaction? We can see from the table below that we have the indifference schedule for food and clothing. That the food column is that of the first column is for food column, and the second column is for clothing column. At a particular time, from this example, we can say when the consumer spend like 35 naira for food, he can spend like 4 naira for clothing. And when the consumer needs to increase the amount to spend on clothing, therefore the consumer will have to reduce the amount to spend on food. And it will continue like that, that as the amount of clothing keep increasing, that of the food will keep decreasing and vice versa. In that case, the table below shows the combination of the quantity of goods that a consumer can consume at a particular period of time with a particular amount of income or a particular amount of resources at hand at that point in time. Let us assume that he is indifferent to any of the combination of the clothing and food as illustrated under this table. That is, he can go with any of these points. That is, we have 35 for food and 4 for clothing, and 23 for food and 8 for clothing, and so on like that. He's so confident and so satisfied with any of these combination, because all this combination will give this consumer a level of satisfaction. But the point is, which point will give him the full satisfaction that will be the best combination? That is where the consumer will need to decide. And that one can be gotten from the diagram, from the graph, by translating this table into graph. From the graph, we can be sure of the point that will give the consumer the highest level of satisfaction. Now let's try to give a kind of two combination of products that a consumer can consume. For example, we said we can have food and clothing, whereby a consumer desires to buy food and clothes to satisfy himself, and he wants to satisfy the two at the same time. Now let's assume that a consumer at a point can have like 35 units of food and 4 units of clothing. This is a level that with the money at the hand of the consumer at that particular time, he can buy 35 food, maybe 35 tubers of yam and 4 pieces of clothes. And at another level, he can buy 23 pieces of yam and another level of 8 units of pieces of clothes. You see now, then another level is we can have 15 and we also have something like 12. You discover that when the quantity of food is reducing, the quantity of clothing is increasing. Why? Because it's still having the same amount of money to buy the two at the same time. Therefore, the money is sacrificing to buy 23 instead of 35 is the one is using to buy the extra unit of clothes. That is why, as food is reducing, the quantity of food is reducing, the quantity of clothes is increasing. Also, it can continue like that, like we have something like 9 quantity of food and 16 quantity of clothes. We can also have 6 and we have 20. Discover that it keeps increasing. Then it can continue like that. We have 4 and we have 24. And we have 3 and we have 28. Let's stop here so that we can use this one as a sample. So you discover that the quantity of food keep decreasing while the quantity of clothing keep increasing. And to know which level will give this consumer the highest satisfaction, we can get that one either by getting it on graph or by calculation. And to get it on graph, that means we need to plot these two on, these two column, clothing column and food column, on a graph. And the graph will look like this. This will be the origin, the point at which the two of them meet. And let's represent the y-axis with food and x-axis with clothing. And if you look at the table, you discover that the highest number, the highest figure there is 35. That one will guide us of how to range, the range to use for the scale to use for both axes. And let's use something like 5. We start with the range of 5, then 10, then followed by 15, followed by 20, followed by 25, 30, 35, 40. In this case, we'll be able to cover the highest point, which is 35. That means 35 will be accommodated under our graph. And the same scale will go for clothing. And we have something like 5, 10, we have 15, we have 20, we have 25, we have 30, we have 35, and we have 40. With these scales and this preparation for the graph, we'll be able to accommodate all these figures inside the graph. Now let's take it one after the other. When food happen to be the 35 quantity, this is food at 35 quantity, and clothing happen to be 4 quantity. This is 0.5. That means 4 will be a little bit closer to 5. Let's say this is 4. Then this point and this point need to meet. This point will continue like this, and this one will continue up like this. This is the point where they meet. You circle it. Then move to the second one, 23 to 8. This is 0.25. This is 0.20. 23 will be something around the middle. Let's say this is 23, the point 23. And you trace it to where we can have 8. 8 also will be closer to 10 compared to 5. Will be somewhere around here. We have 0.8 here. Then you draw it up and you draw this one vertically. The point where they meet is where we mark in order to know where our graph will pass through. Also, we have 0.15. This is 0.15, and we have it against 12. 12 will be somewhere around the middle of 10 and 15. Then we'll cross it against each other, and this is where they meet. You circle it also and write out the point so that to be clear of what we are doing. Then we also have 0.9. 9 will be closer to 10 of food. Then we have 16 of clothing. This is 0.15 for clothing on this axis, and 16 will be somewhere closer to this place. And 9 and 16 will have something like this. And this is the point. You circle it in order to know where it is. Then on food, we still have 6. 6 will be a little bit above 0.5. This is 0.5. Then against 20. This is 0.20. Then you take it like this. And this is where they meet with 20. Also, we have 4. 4 will be a little bit below 5 along this food axis. Then against what? Against 25. 24. 24 will be somewhere here. We have 24 here. Then it will be like this. And you mark the point. Don't forget, so that you know where to join the graph together. Then the last one, we have 3. 3 will be a little bit below 4. This is 0.4. This is 0.3. And against 28. 28 will be somewhere closer to 30 here, and you draw it against each other to go like this, and this is the point. Now you join the whole point together. And the graph, this curve, represents the level of satisfaction or utility that the consumer derives at each point in time. And this is what we call indifference curve. Indifference curve. That is, the consumer is satisfied with any point of this consumption. That is, any point that this graph can pass through, the consumer is satisfied with it. This is the level of satisfaction that the consumer derives. But anything below that falls below, in between this curve and the origin is disutility. If we have something here, if you have any point here, whereby it's like this, whereby we have maybe 12 and we have something like 7, this point is disutility because it's not up to the maximum graph that gives this consumer the maximum satisfaction. Like we said, any point along this curve will give the consumer the maximum satisfaction. But any point below this curve, in between this curve and the origin, will give the consumer lesser satisfaction. But any point above this curve to the right hand will give the consumer more satisfaction than any of these curves. For example, if you have any point here like point B, then this point B will give the consumer more satisfaction than any point along this curve, and this will be a full or maximum satisfaction, or full satisfaction or utility. And that is to know whether the consumer, if you have any point along inside with this table that give us something here that is different from this graph or that is below this graph, then at that point the consumer will be